Hello, and welcome to the SharePoint Framework and JavaScript Special Interest Group Biweekly Sync. It is September 24th, 2020. Man, almost another month down. Excited to see what our agenda is today. Standard updates here, latest updates on SharePoint Framework, updates on the Patterns and Practices program. We got new community samples. We'll do our picture time, and then great demos from Markus, Anoop, and Siddharth. Excited to see those here a little bit later in the call. We always talk about our opportunities to participate. Encourage anybody who's interested in doing a demo, please reach out to myself or Vesa. We'll get you on the schedule. I think, as I always say, the demos are one of the most valuable parts of this call. So I really want to give folks a chance to show off their work and give everybody else a chance to learn from the great work we're all doing across the community. I want to remind folks, all of our projects welcome contributions on GitHub. They can take the form of reporting issues, submitting pull requests, or of course, you can always help other folks that have issues or questions if you have a little bit of time and happen to know the answer. That's always very much appreciated. And finally, we encourage you to provide any feedback around the Patterns and Practices program all up. So how are the calls? How is our documentation? Where else can we provide additional help? And of course, positive feedback is okay too. If we're doing something well and you want to see a little bit more of that, please do let us know and we'll try and work that into the program. Our next slide here is a collection of links. So I won't go through all of these. We're trying to be a little bit faster through our intro period here, but the main link there is aka.ms/m365pnp. That's got all your links to all of the SharePoint Patterns and Practices resources, including the developer videos, the community videos, links to all of our open source repositories, all of which welcome your contributions and participation. And then we've got a whole host of sample galleries, all of which linked from aka.ms/m365pnp for all your PnP needs. Next is David Warner. Are you ready to go?
Absolutely. Thank you, Patrick. So the Sharing is Caring program is here for those who are looking to get involved in contributing to the Patterns and Practices community. If you're overwhelmed by some of the details and hurdles that GitHub provides, these are hands-on guided sessions that we will walk you through how to begin contributing step by step. If you're also new to the community in just terms of consuming some of our samples and resources, we have sessions for that as well, which you can go ahead and register for, all of which are completely free, different days of the month, different times of the day to try to satisfy our global community. So feel free to check out aka.ms Sharing is Caring and sign up for one of the sessions. We'd love to see you. Back to you, Patrick.
Thanks, David. Yeah, really great initiative. Encourage folks to check that out if you're looking on ways to get involved and maybe how to get started. Really outstanding. We've seen some great reviews from that and seen a lot of people do their first time contributions coming out of those sessions. So do check those out. Now, this is a slide that snuck in here. So virtual booth duty for Ignite this year. That is today, Thursday, 24th of September. So you check those out. There's two links down there at the bottom, aka.ms odsp-ignite-dev1 and same thing, -dev2. And that is a great opportunity to just sort of ask questions, very informal environment, very much like walking up to a booth at Ignite. But since none of us are at Ignite, this is the next best thing. So two different time slots there to try and cover different parts of the world as best we can, and encourage everybody to, if you have questions or just want to come hang out, join in those calls. Certainly welcome you and encourage you to check those out. SharePoint Framework updates. Vesa.
Excellent. Thank you, Patrick. By the way, the first slot on the virtual booths is right after this call, so I will jump in directly there if there's any questions which we didn't answer in here. So we wanted to actually quickly just recap on the usage of the SharePoint Framework. So the worldwide usage on the SharePoint Framework is again skyrocketing. And you can see a small, well, there's a data glitch in the spring. There was a small dip on the summertime, which is completely as expected. The last dates are for the last 1.5 months, we are skyrocketing in above 45° on the usage growth. So it is great to see the interest across the community, customers and partners on using SharePoint Framework. We also, like you've seen, potentially in the Ignite messaging, we're really positioning SharePoint Framework also for Microsoft Teams. And the Microsoft Teams extensibility built using SPFx is growing at the 43% month-over-month rate right now, which is really insane. So a lot of people are actually building awesome stuff and offering those to their customer. Just to recap on that statement, We have two call statements from Jeff Teeper related on SharePoint Framework because we are in the SharePoint Framework community call. The first one was this one, which is SharePoint Framework is one of the Microsoft fastest growing modern development platforms, reaching millions of end users each day. And we're taking this to the next level by enabling you to build Microsoft Teams apps with SPFx. So we're making a really big investments right now and focusing resources and making the SharePoint Framework as the pro development. That's probably the right way of doing that. Professional development platform also for Microsoft Teams. So really additional capabilities there. You can use it in there already today, but you will see more investments and more capabilities over there in the future. The next slide is a second statement, which was pretty cool from Jeff, which is SharePoint is the easiest way for developers to build powerful solutions that reach hundreds of millions of end users in the flow of their work in both SharePoint and in Microsoft Teams. And this is actually really good to remember. By the way, those who do not know, Jeff Teeper owns he owns Microsoft Teams and OneDrive and SharePoint. So he leads the development and messaging, and he's the face of all of these solutions. Just a quick recap on the road ahead. We didn't actually announce anything super cool on the Ignite. We gave the opportunity for other, let's say, extensibility options to gain more visibility as well in Ignite, because we just released 1.11 pretty recently. But we are right now focusing on the performance improvements, permission and auth changes. So we're moving from old model and authentication model to the MSAL. Teams improvements, plenty of those in the pipeline. And then there's a lot of improvements related on upscaling the technical background of the SharePoint framework. So keeping up with the community with the latest technology. But that's it from my side.
All right. PnP JS client-side updates. We released 2.0.10 2 weeks ago. That was a quick kind of fix patch release for some bugs we found that we introduced in 2.0.9, which is never good. So we got that out really quick to unblock folks. Sorry about that. Our 2.0.11 regularly scheduled release for October 9th. We'll be back on our normal schedule following the intermediate update there. And as always, you can follow M365 PnP JS on Twitter. Thank you to everybody that helped contribute to the 2.0.10 release with reporting the issues and so forth. And you can always direct all feedback to the issues list there. pnp.github.io/PnPjs for your docs. And that's our client-side update. CLI for Microsoft 365 released a new 3.1 preview with updates there for retrieving and moving emails, retrieving Power Apps, 365 service messages, and historical Microsoft 365 service status. We've welcomed a new maintainer. Welcome Mark Powney to helping out with the CLI. Appreciate you jumping in. And if you've tried out the CLI, definitely let everybody on that team know how it's working for you. And the CLI is now available natively in the Azure Cloud Shell, which is very, very exciting to see that integration happen. And you can use that right out of the box in the Cloud Shell. So encourage everybody to check that out. On the reusable components, React Controls 2.0, so supporting Office UI Fabric v6, a new file picker control with new properties, a few bug fixes, and for migration from v1, there's a migration guide for both the controls and the property controls included. So encourage everybody to try out these controls. It's a great way to get outstanding out-of-the-box appearing support for various editing and display components right in your applications without a whole lot of extra work. And V2 supports SharePoint Online only. So just a note there, sometimes you've got to make choices, and V2 is going to be SharePoint Online only. For on-prem, V1 will continue to be supported for the foreseeable future. And Modern Search, PnP Modern Search. So building the modern search experience with a flexible set of web parts. Version 3.15.2 is available. That's a September 2020 release. So minor fixes, some bug fixes and refiners, and 6 new contributors. Very excited to welcome all of those folks. And V4 is slowly getting started. We've had a little bit of back and forth on how that design is going to go. So very excited to see the work moving forward there. We're going to have a plugin style architecture for templating and a search backend with graph search support. So that's important addition there to get onto the Microsoft Graph. And then killing some existing custom renderer and replacing with web components. And then you can see the link there for V4 if you're interested in checking out the work going on or want to perhaps work on that and contribute. PnP Modern Search Tree version 4. You can find that on GitHub under the branches menu for Microsoft-Search. And the current version of 3x, still not looking for PRs for new features, only doing kind of bug fixes for version 3. So Modern Search, another excellent tool in your tool belt. Please do check that out. And for the samples, I think that's going to be Hugo.
That is me. Thank you. So the PnP samples are repositories that can help get you started by providing samples that are built by an inclusive community that welcomes everyone and encourages a positive attitude and helping each other. So if you're looking for samples or you'd like to share some cool stuff you've done, from simple concepts to complex solutions, please visit aka.ms/SPFx-web parts and aka.ms/SPFx-extensions. These are the updates from the last 2 weeks. On the extension side, we have a new PnP field renderer helper by Alex Trentiev, which demonstrates how to use the PnP reusable control field renderer utility. We also have 2 updates to the App Insights web parts or extensions from Xiao Li, so thank you for that. On the web part side, we have a lot of updates on My Tasks, list forms, and the dictionary web part, and we have a new user profile photo sync by Sudhar San, which allows you to synchronize user profile photos between file location on your workstation or from Azure AD. So thanks to everyone who contributed. And again, we encourage you to go check out the samples. Back to you, Patrick.
Thank you, Hugo. And now we'll do our optional picture time. So anybody who wants to may turn on their camera and join in the...
Already time for that. So, okay, so let's do a together mode. So let me share my screen and I can actually then show how we're looking in the together mode, and I will take screen pictures on that. Because I think people actually like this. So this is really good. There we go. Ooh. I think we have a max 50 or 49 attendees. I think we're hitting pretty much right now on the limit. And the scout man has something really weird on his hands. So that looks straight. Oh, it's a SharePoint monkey. How did I miss it? Because it's Ignite. Of course it is. Okay, one more time. Everybody smiles. Hey, all right. Excellent. Good. I think that's it. Thank you. Thanks. Cool. Let's move forward. Patrick.
All right. So I have to take over the sharing again. This takes the most time out of all the things we do, by the way. So on to the demos.
It's fun. Come on.
Anoop, you ready to go? If you want to go ahead and share your screen.
All right, let me try that.
Take it away.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. Hello, everyone. So they say that it's good to start a presentation with an interesting fact. So the interesting fact for today is World Bollywood Day. Yeah, that's right. Today is World Bollywood Day. Now you might be wondering, how is that relevant to the presentation that I'm doing? So what happened was, a couple of months back, Microsoft Graph APIs for taxonomy were released, and I did a little Bollywood dance after that. So that's why it's related. Anyway, that's by the by. So in today's presentation, we'll be mainly focusing on that, the Microsoft Graph APIs for taxonomy. A couple of years back, I wrote my first blog on managed metadata. So that time I used JSON to get all the data from the term store and display it onto the page using some HTML. Fast forward 2 years, we've got the Graph APIs now, which can talk to the term store and display the data. Right. All right, boring slide. So that's me, Anoop Tatti. I'm a SharePoint developer at Content and Code, and that's my blog on Medium at under the username Anoop T. And I am on Twitter as well with the username Anoop Tells. I tweet about SharePoint, and then that's my GitHub repo. My username is Anoop T. So let's have a look at the demo first, and then look at the code. So what I've done here is I've gone onto my dev tenant and I've opened the term store. So here I've got a term group called as one company, which is an imaginary company, and in that company we've got a term set called as R locations. So this term set basically represents the locations of all the offices of this company. So we've got all the different countries at the top, and then if I expand one of the countries, say UK, we've got London and Manchester as the two cities where the offices are. So if I go on to the page which has the web part for today's demonstration, so here I've got a web part, and what I do is I just edit the web part and then set the property, the only property, which is the term set ID, as the ID of the of this term set, which is our locations. And after that, what happens is the web part queries the term store, gets all the countries which are present in the term store, and displays them in this drop down. And then if I select a country, it goes ahead and queries the term store again to get all the cities under the selected country. So in this case, we get London and Manchester. And then if I select London, it goes ahead and shows the location in a map of the of the selected city. So here we are using the PnP SPFx maps control to display the map. And regarding the pointer or the exact location, the way we are displaying that is by using the latitude and longitude that have been set. And if I just quickly go back to the term store and then select London, what we have done here is in the description, so which is right over here. So in the description, we've set the latitude and longitude that we need to be displayed in the map. So that's what the web part does. Now let's have a look at the code and how it's been done. So the web part is part of the PnP SPFx dev samples repository. So you can find the code over there. And what I've done here is I've just expanded that particular web part, and we'll walk through it. Before going through this, I just want to thank Hugo for the presentation tips. I've used Hugo's ideas in this presentation. So what I've done here is I've highlighted the main component, which is the cascading managed metadata. And that component, let's start with the render method of that. What it does is it renders the different controls. So basically a drop down for the country, a drop down for city, and then the map control, and finally the message control. That's what we see. At the top we've got the country drop down, the city drop down, and then the maps. And then in that same control, we've got a method or a function to get the countries. So just before going to that, I want to mention that we are using React functional components over here. There are a couple of nice samples in the PnP dev FX web parts repository by Bill Ayers and Ramin, which can be looked at for the functional components. And I guess there are a couple of demo videos as well on the same. So we are using functional components over here. Now coming back to this web part, the first thing that we do on load is we need to get all the countries. So those countries are the first level terms in the country, in the locations term set that we saw earlier. So that's why what we do is we hit the graph endpoint, which is term store /sets/ term set ID /children. So we would have gotten the term set ID from the properties that we set. So just to give you a quick look at the term set again, we've got the R locations and then all the countries under that, and that's what we populate in the drop down on the left side. Now, once we have all the countries populated, what we do is, when a user selects a country, we then need to get the children or the child terms under that selected country. So again, we hit the graph endpoint, which is now terms/the term ID and children. That will go ahead and fetch all the first level children under that term. So in this case, we selected UK as the country, and then the first level terms under UK were London and Manchester. So that's what we get back from the API, and we fill those details in the dropdown. And then what we do is when we get back the cities, we also get the description of the term. So in this case, for London, we get the description as the coordinates of the term. So that's what gets stored in the drop-down item as well. We will come to that in a minute. So what happens is once the cities are populated and the user selects a city, we then go ahead and call this function, which is onCityChange. And what we do here is we get that particular city, and then the description, which has the latitude and longitude, gets stored as the key of the drop-down item. So we get that key and then get the latitude and longitude from that key. We just split it by semicolon, and then that's what we use to display the map. So once we have the coordinates, we just set the state with the required latitude and longitude, and the map control makes use of these latitude and longitude values to display the map. So that's the web part in a sense. Now, the services that we are using here is mainly Microsoft Graph. So we've got a file here called msgraph.ts, and I would like to thank Michael Swenson for this code. So he has written a nice blog article on how we can use Graph in SPFx. I know there are a lot of options, but this is one of the options. So all I've done is just went to his blog and then literally copied that file and then put it in the services folder. That file has got 4 methods to do all the CRUD operations. So all we have to do is just pass in the required endpoint to one of these methods, and then the rest is taken care. And caching. So caching is an important thing in any web part or in any code that we write. So here we've got a file called mmdservice.ts. So what we do here is we don't want to hit the term store again and again to get the data. So that's why whenever the web part tries to get the cities under the selected country, the first thing we do is use the session storage to get the required cities, and if they are not present, then we hit the API, get the cities, and then add them back again in the session storage using the session storage.set item method. And then finally, on the logging side, what I've done is in the main component, use these console.debug messages to which we can pass some the string format. So %s stands for a string, %o stands for an object. So what I tend to do is usually the first one will be a constant log source that with which we can easily see the logs. So if I just show you an example of how it looks in the browser, I open the console, and then if I search for Cascading MFD, it just filters all the messages. So in that way, it'll be easier to look at the information and to see what's going on. Right, a couple of improvements that can be made to this web part. So at the moment, the web part supports only 2-level cascading. So that's we select a country and then we select a city. So maybe in the future we can add dynamic level cascading. So maybe in the web part property we just set how many levels of cascading or hierarchy we want, and then the web part renders those many drop downs dynamically. And then the other thing is local custom properties. So what we saw earlier was to get the coordinates, i.e. the latitude and longitude, we used the description of the term. So instead, we can use the, the coordinates can be stored in the local or the custom properties of the term. Now, I didn't find any method using the Graph API to get these properties, so that's why I was using the description to store the coordinates. But in future, if there is an endpoint to get the custom properties, then we'll be using that one. Or if there is one already, please raise that as an issue in the repository, and I'll look into resolving that. And finally, these are all the resources that were used while developing this web part. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Fantastic demo, Anoop. I really appreciate you putting that together. Very cool to see those capabilities. So let's try Markus again, if you're ready to go. Let's see if we can't make Teams work this time.
Let's try it again. My name is Markus Möller. I'm a Microsoft 365 developer from Germany. I work there for Avanade. You can reach me on Twitter or via my blog. And the last line is only in case you have some background noise again, which I cannot put on mute. So today, as already announced in the intro, I want to talk about a new capability of SharePoint Framework. This was available or is available since only 1.11 to use SPFx for task modules in Teams, especially in messaging extensions. And I will also how simple it is from there to access the Microsoft Graph, as we know from SPFx in general. So let's switch to my short demo scenario. Some of you might know this. I presented quite the same scenario 7 weeks ago in the general dev call, and those time it was a normal Teams app, and there was a search-based messaging extension. And today I show this in an action-based SPFx variant. So in short, we have some documents somewhere which need a review from time to time. I pointed out 3 ones here which never been reviewed and are due since a couple of days. And this is now what we want to communicate inside Teams. So we can start our messaging extension, for instance, from the compose bar here. And what we see now is the first task module developed or rendered by SPFx. And there are our 3 documents which we already awaited. One is quite overdue. This is why I formatted a bit different, but we will pick this one, select it with a double click. And there we are back in our communication with an adaptive card, which shows the details about the document together with 2 actions. The first action, the view action, quite boring, just opening an URL. The second one is much more interesting for us. This will put this document automatically on reviewed, but not the simple way, because when we click it, we will get another task module, which will now gather some input from us. Here we have a quite simple scenario. We only ask for a date for the next awaited review in the near future. We can pick one and kick it off with the reviewed action. And now the task module inside SPFx was writing this back via graph to the library, and we can already see this here over a few seconds ago. Where's my last review date? That's strange. But it should. There it is, yeah. There it is, new dates, and that's so-called fine. So let's get back to the slides because I want to show you how this works. So first, the question is, how does this get invoked? We have 2 solutions. We have a very small bot solution, and we have a web part solution in that SPFx. In SPFx, we have our manifest, which points out the messaging extension as a so-called compose extension. And here, the most important thing is the task info notation and the URL. This URL you can see at the bottom as well. I pulled this out a bit to make this a bit more visible. This has some parameters. And here's first to mention the team side domain. This is an automatic parameter resolved by Teams itself, so we do not really have to care for this. But the second one is what we have to care for. This is the component ID. And this component ID is exactly the same than our web part ID, which we know from our web part manifest. In our case, you have seen 2 task modules. So my solution contains 2 web parts. And you will later see the second URL with a different component ID. But here, for the moment, this is the first one. And this tells Teams when someone invokes this messaging extension to render that specific SharePoint component. Once this starts, we can first detect if we are really in the right context. This can be done in the onInit method with this line especially, which shows that the context application name. If this is Teams task module application, then we are inside the task module, because this task module has no specific supported host property, as you might know from web part or Teams tabs or single page applications. This property supported host does not really matter in this case. So here we detect, hey, we are really inside a Teams messaging extension, taking this as a Boolean parameter and handing this over to our root React component, where we can later execute our code or not if we are in the wrong context. Next thing is, once we have rendered our task module, in this case with a, I used the Fluent UI list. You can see this here in the details list. There's one method called item invoked, which is executed once the user double clicks an item. In that special case, I'm checking here the already mentioned, hey, are we in the Teams messaging extension? And if so, we call from the Teams SDK a submit task function and hand over our document item to this. And now we are switching the solution and coming to the backend to our bot solution, which is quite small. We only have one class with 2 functions, we will see. So the most of the logic in the SPFx stuff. What we are doing here in the first function, you cannot really see the name, but this is the messaging extension submit action, which is executed because we just executed submit task. We will take some data from the item. For instance, here the URL, where I shortened, by the way, the body here to make this more visible and point out the important things. We can create an adaptive card from this and insert, for instance, a submit action, but not a normal submit action. We can classify this in a Teams case specifically as an MS Teams task fetch activity. And furthermore, we also once again hand over our item. And this is how the adaptive card comes back to our front end. You've seen this, looks like this. And now we, in our case, or even as to point out, this is a communication thing. So this can be also another user who can click on the review button. We will then get back to the second function in our backend bot solution. And this is, as we already pointed out, the task module fetch activity. First thing is, I already announced this. We have a second component ID here, which we included in our URL. I pointed this out again for better readability. And the second interesting thing in this time where I use this quite the same URL structure again is that I'm additionally adding a custom property, which I can also do here in this case, because here I can control the URL. So I can hand over my item ID back to the task module, to the next one we will see, and say, hey, we are now concerned about item ID 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And this, of course, is taken from the handed in item, what arrived here. Now, second task module opened in Teams again. Once again, we are back inside SharePoint Framework code. We render, in this case, only a simple form, small date picker, and the default button. The default button is the only point to mention here. On exec, it executes the reviewed action. This action once again detects, hey, we are in a Teams messaging extension or not, calculates some dates, and finally initializes our graph task and sets the document to reviewed. And at the very end, it calls another submit task function, this time without a parameter. And this is, this achieves that only the task module gets finally closed. There's no round trip to the server again, so the bot class will not be reached again with this action. So let's finally have a look into the graph service and point out some other thing. What we can see here is I pointed out that you use the document, the get documents for review function. The writing back reviewed function is quite the same. What we first do is we retrieve a configuration from a parallel SP service controller. I do not really want to go into details here because this is quite a simple operation. What I'm doing is, as I'm in a SharePoint framework context, I'm simply retrieving my parameters from filled out tenant properties. This is quite an easy operation inside SharePoint framework. Inside a native Teams application, I would think about different options because there it would be much more complex to retrieve it from SharePoint tenant properties. And what I use, in fact, are two parameters here, my site ID and my list ID, which I need to retrieve my data from the right library. Finally, just as a wrap up, also a small diagram how this works from beginning from the Invoke operation over to the first task module, then into the backend bot component, back to the adaptive card, and then the final task and the final task module. And this thing, or this demo, or this code sample is part of a series that I wrote in my blog. You might have seen, as I mentioned 7 weeks ago, I was presenting in the general dev call a search-based messaging extension where the authentication took place in the backend via the bot channel. Then I wrote an additional option where I used the action-based variant for this same scenario, and there the authentication took place in the front end via Teams SSO. And now today you've seen the SPFx alternative where authentication, I think you haven't really seen something about authentication, but that is because the graph handling inside SPFx is quite that easy. And I did not really point it out here because I think you have seen it a dozen of times in those kind of demos already. What I'm missing a bit, and maybe my next step might be to write a small wrap-up where I have a small side-by-side summary comparison and the recommendation to do this or that option in this or that scenario. Last not least, some resources. My blog post, which also points out to the rest of my series. The sample is already available in the Teams Dev Samples PnP repository. For those checking this out, forgive me, I need another PR. I checked this because my code does look a bit ugly in terms of indentation and so I will update this soon. In my own repository, you can reach via my blog. It already looks a bit more cleaned up. And finally, there's also a small Microsoft documentation on this, how to expose a web part as a Microsoft Teams messaging extension on this, with a quite popular sample behind. And therefore, I took some of the shown things here, but not all of them. And that's from my side. So thank you. And if you have questions, feel free to use the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Markus. Really interesting demo again from the community. So thank you for taking the time to do that. And our last demo today is Siddharth. If you are ready to go, feel free to take over the presentation.
Thanks, Patrick. Yes, I'm ready to go. Yeah, hi, everyone. Today, I'll be talking about an SPFx web part, from where we can test some PnPjs SharePoint methods. This web part is developed by me along with Kun Sangani. So before starting, a little bit about myself. I'm Siddharth Vaghasia. I'm a technical consultant. And these are some of the social handlers through which you can connect with me. I would also like to extend my thanks to Kunj, who collaborated with me on this particular sample web part and helped me develop this web part. These are some of the social handlers. I'm sure he would be on this call if you would like to connect with him. So this is the repo link to the dev web parts where the sample is there. So driving factor, like as we know, there is an heavy usage of SPFx to customize our SharePoint based and now team based solutions also. And among this customization which we do, we know that we all SPFx developer kind of use PnPjs every now and then rather than calling the native REST APIs around SharePoint and Graph also, right? So during the development, what I have found is, there were times where we wanted to know what all attributes or properties are getting returned in the response, right? And typically what we do is we either use console.log or either we debug the JavaScript, we write some line of code and see what all attributes are giving, what names are there, like internal names of the columns and everything. And then maybe we go back to our code and change something, right? And so this was the one of the most driving factor, wherein I wanted to build something which from which I can quickly test the PnPjs method and see what output or what response it is giving us, right? So there are other tools also which are available, which I have found when I posted something on the Twitter regarding this web part, which help us doing so. But this comes in handy at times, and I personally do use this to test the PnPjs methods. Coming to the summary, so this is basically an utility web part, right? So this is not something which we would be using for the end user or which we would be giving to the end user, right? And it allows us to test the PnPjs methods, and the response which we get will be displayed in a beautiful JSON viewer format. And by default, this web part would run in the context of the current site collection, but we do have option wherein we can specify if we wanted to run the PnPjs method in a different site collection context or a different sub-site context, right? It also has support for get and post methods, and there are some of the examples which we have kept in the web parts itself so that we get used to on how to use this web part, right? One thing I wanted to note here is that as of now, this web part only supports or maybe we have tested only with the SharePoint method. So it means that only the PnPjs methods from the SharePoint package can be tested here, but we are planning to extend it to the Graph and the other packages also, right? So coming to the demo, so this is my demo. Workbench where I have run this demo, and this is how the UI looks like. Ideally, I started with a different look and feel, and then I went back to Twitter for a feedback. And thanks to Alex, he pointed out that it might be really helpful if we develop the user interface which looks like the Graph API Explorer. And that's when Kunj came and extended his help and converted this kind of web part into the new user interface, right? So now this is the web part, okay, and there is an option to either select the get and post method. Okay, and this is the text box where we can put the command. And now, like typically, let me go back, and what we do is if we wanted to try some of the PnPjs code, right, we use the PnPjs documentation. And like, for example, if I wanted to see, I wanted to get the title of the current web which I'm running. So what we do, we write this similar kind of code. But if I wanted to know what is the title, or if I wanted to know what response it is going to give me in which format, what I can do is I can go and copy paste things here, and I can just run the query, and it will give me the output of the JSON, and that output would be displayed in the JSON viewer here, right? So similar way, the other examples which I can think of would be typically to get the maybe current user data. So if you click on the samples, there is some of the samples which we have included, which we can directly use by just customizing some of the columns or the list name on which we wanted to run. So like, for example, if I wanted to test this particular method to get the current user using PnPjs method, if I run the query, it will give me the response which I'll return. And in fact, there we can see, what all attributes or what all properties are being written by this particular method. Similar way, just another example, like getting the item from the SharePoint list. Okay, so this is most typical use case we use during this. So I do have a list which is created. So I'll just modify the list name in the command. And if I put a run query on it, what I get is I get the output and it is getting displayed. So basically the output is from this particular list, which has 2 items, and whatever response we are getting, that is getting displayed here. And this can be then used to check the column names and the values which we are getting, or what all properties we are getting. So it's more like an go-to web part, which we can deploy it at one place and try that out, and then just go and write our SPFx code, right? So another thing is we can also try post thing. Like for example, if I'll just put a simple example here, like which is to add a list item into a particular SharePoint list. So if I talk about this timeline list, right? And if I put an item here, so what I do is I just change the name of the list, and this is the simplest JSON object which we can pass, because we know the title column would be always there. And if I run this query, it will give me error because it's not a get function. So I'll put a post, and if I run the query, the post method would be triggered. And if I go and refresh the page here, you can see that the items are there. So maybe this was the item which I created previously, right? So this is how we can test the methods. So any method which is there in the PnP SP methods can be tested here. Other thing which I wanted to highlight is, like, what if we wanted to run it into a different site collection context, right? So for that, there is an option where we can just say, use for other site collection or subsite. And to demonstrate this, I have a different site collection here. So what I do is I just put the URL of that particular site collection. And for example, if I just wanted to get the items from this particular demo list, which is there, which is available in this site collection. So I just change the name to demo list. And if I run the query, okay, so this would be a get method. So if I run the query, I get the output from that particular method. And there are other options, like if I wanted to show the data types or not. If I say yes, it will tell us, what kind of data type it is giving. I can also select the count. So basically, these are the 25 items are basically the property count for each object which we have. There are total 5 items there. I can also enable clipboard, wherein we can just copy the output of that particular attributes or property which we have, and there is an option to expand and collapse everything. So this is about the demo, and just to get used to this web part, okay, I have just all provided the link to PnPjs so that it takes us to the whatever methods which are supported into PnPjs here. Now coming to the code, what we have is this is a React-based SPFx web part, right? And so from the webpart.ts file, there's nothing fancy. We are just passing the context of the web part to the React component. And within React component, first let me go to the render method. So we are using Office UI Fabric to build the user interface which we have, like the drop down and text field and checkboxes and everything. So this is pretty much what we generally use to develop a SPFx web part. So I won't go into detail of this. And it is using states and everything to control what all methods, what all input user is providing and what all output we wanted to put it into the user. Right. Then another thing is the main method is the execute command, right? So this is the method which gets called when we click on the run query button, right? And the first thing we do is we set the PnP method. So within the set PnP method, what we have is if the option is selected for other site collection URL, right? So we all know that with PnPjs, what we can do is we can set up the PnP either to a particular SharePoint site or a subsite, or we can directly put the provide the context which we have from the web part, right? So this is just basically to set up the PnPjs. So if the other site is selected, it will go and put the site context to that particular site URL using the base URL property. And if not, it will run in the current context site where the web part has been deployed or where it is running. Then other thing is this is just to clear the state objects, okay? And to display the JSON which we get, I'm using an npm package React JSON view, which requires just an JSON object as an input, and it will automatically take care of displaying it in the expand collapse way, which we have seen already. So these are some of the cleanup strings which I need to do, is because thing is what happens is there are some methods where we wanted to use get, where we don't wanted to put get and everything. So to make it consistent and everything, I typically tested some of the methods and try to find out what all commands are available in the PnPjs documentation, and then used the custom logic to replace the string which is provided by the user, and then to control while running this particular command. Okay. Now, interesting thing here is how do I run this command dynamically, right? So I'm not sure, but there is, I mean, who all know, but there is a command JavaScript method which says eval, which basically allows us to evaluate a JavaScript code and execute it. So this is interesting, and this is how I am running the PnPjs method dynamically onto that particular web part, right? So once I have the command, I'm just building a dynamic JavaScript code using try-catch method, wherein typically if you see this will turns out to be, try sp.web. And then we are using then method, which is basically the promise. And once we get the promise, we get the result. And once we get the result, what we do is we put the result into the JSON response object, which is basically a state object, which takes care of rendering into that view format. And if there are some errors, also we are using that particular JSON response and putting it in as an error response. So if suppose there is an error, it will still go and display the error saying that, maybe the column doesn't exist, maybe the list doesn't exist. That would be displayed in the JSON, so we know that we are making some mistake while testing the command code, right? So this is important method, and this is the smallest function which you are using. So idea behind this web part is, the magic happens here, so like dynamically executing the PnP command which user is inputting. For the sample commands which we see on the right hand side panel, what we have done is we have created a sample.json file where we have put all the commands, and then we are just dynamically building the action button, okay, by using the map function, so that all the commands are executed, and once user clicks on any of the command, it automatically gets populated to the text web part, text box, right? So this is about the code, and another thing I wanted to highlight here is that we are using a older PnP version, which is 2.0.5, but this can be easily upgraded. The only thing we have to do is, because this is a simple SPFx web part, we have to just update the npm package to get the latest version of the PnP, and all the latest method and all the latest bug fixes which have been done in the latest package would be available. So this is about it. This is about the web part, and if any questions or anything, I would be looking at the chat window, and I'm sure Kunj might be already helping that. So that's it from my side. Thank you again for providing this opportunity to demonstrate this web part into this community call. Over to you, Patrick.
That was a great demo. That was really, really cool.
So great demos from everybody. Thank you, Markus. Thank you, Anoop. Thank you, Siddharth. Very cool to see that PnPjs Explorer. I know there were a few comments in the chat about opportunities to enhance that. So I imagine you are open to having some contributors to help enhance that as you go. So I encourage folks to check that out, and did see the idea of sharing that via the docs. So we'll take a look at doing that. Outstanding demos, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you are interested in demoing, please reach out to myself or Vesa, and we will make sure to get you on the schedule. We're just going to take this slide out in the future, and want to encourage folks to check out the recording, which will be available in about 24 hours on our YouTube channel, give or take. You can follow us on Twitter. Our next SPFX focused call will be on October 8th. That's in 2 weeks, same time. And our next general dev call will be next Thursday, October 1st, same time as this one. We do have an upcoming monthly community call for October on October 13th. So thank you all for joining the call today. And there's a whole host of other community calls you can attend if you have the time and interest, and encourage you to check out one or more of any of these. Lots of great topics, lots of great communities out there to be a part of in your development life. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for all the contributions from everybody, and thank you for all the demos this week. Everybody have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Awesome, everybody. Thank you.